professor of religion at Vanderbilt University. And of course, Dr. Baldwin, let me welcome you
thank you so much, Dr. Haynes. It's always great to talk to you.
And Dr. Baldwin, you know, I can't even introduce you to this audience because you've been with us on so many occasions.
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, the last time you were with us, I think we talked about the election of President Obama.
We did. We talked about the relationship between religion and politics.
Yeah. Good. Very good. Okay. And it's good to talk about something that almost everybody know Dr. Martin Luther King as a spiritual person.
That's right. That's
right.
But
very few people understand Dr. Martin Luther King's spirituality in a real sense, as I think you've laid it out in a couple of your productions. As a matter of fact, I think you've got a well-known book called The Spiritual Life of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
That's right.
And so we want to talk about some of the ideas and some of the concepts that are in that. But before we get into that, Dr. Baldwin, let's have you to give us sort of a statement in reference to your background, your education, and some of the things that...
Okay. I'm from Camden, Alabama. I actually grew up in Wilcox County, Alabama, known as the so-called Black Belt. And I attended the public schools there and graduated from Camden Academy High School in Camden, Alabama in 1967. And from there, I matriculated at Talladega College in Talladega, Alabama, and graduated with a degree in history, a BA degree in history, in 1971. And from there to Crozer Theological Seminary in Rochester, New York. I received 2 degrees at Crozer, a MA in Black Church Studies in 1973, and a Master of Divinity in Theology in 1975. And from there to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, and I received the PhD degree in American Christianity at Northwestern in 1980.
You know, Dr. Baldwin, I don't think, looking at your resume, and I don't think that there would be a person more qualified to speak about the spirituality of Dr. Martin Luther King than yourself. And let's start off. When you think about that, what do you think about Dr. Martin Luther King in terms of spirituality?
Well, the 2 books I've written actually are the culmination of about 25 years of research on the life of Dr. King, and I've always been interested in his spirituality. We know a lot about him as a civil rights leader. A lot has been written on him as a preacher, focusing on his pulpit style and manner, his oratorical and rhetorical skills. But we know very little about his prayer life, which I think constitutes the core of his spirituality. I say in my book, Never to Leave Us Alone, that prayer constituted the central core of Dr. King's spirituality. We know a lot about him as a preacher and as a sermonizer, but you can't understand him as a preacher and a sermonizer without getting at his prayer life.
Good.
Because prayer, as he viewed it, was part of the total experience of living. And it was very much connected with his sermon preparation, with his sermon delivery, and also with his role as a civil rights leader.
Everything he did had prayer involved in it in a real sense, I think.
Absolutely, yes, yes.
Now, he was an extraordinary man. What about his prayer life? I mean, when you start thinking, when you got ready to write this book, I mean, when you finally got finished to put the final product together, what were some of the things that brought you to where you were?
Well, I, as a student, was involved in some of the demonstrations in the South, particularly in Alabama, and I was very much inspired by Dr. King's leadership. And I always thought that the most important element in getting at the person of Dr. King, of course, is his spirituality. And I noticed when I was doing research on Dr. King in the 80s and 90s and writing about him in the 90s and more recently, that scholars had focused a lot on him as a preacher, but had not looked at the central core of his spirituality. So I decided that I would look at the prayer life, his life of prayer and meditation, because I think that is the foundation, that was the foundation, rather, of his devotional life. I should say that in writing this book on his prayer life, I sort of focused on 4 levels. I looked at prayer as the foundation of his personal devotional life. I also looked at prayer as a vital part of his sermon preparation, his preaching. I treated prayer as a vital dimension of his service and caring function as a pastor. and also looked at how he employed prayer and within the context of the civil rights movement. And by that I mean prayer was used to inspire and motivate people in the context of the struggle.
Let's take this first commercial break, and when we come back, we'll go over all 4 of those areas in terms of Dr. Martin Luther King. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial. Louis Baldwin from Vanderbilt University.